Okay, so fair warning to everybody here. We are talking about money, and today we're going to use the word. The word you've all been waiting for. Budget. We're going to talk about budgeting today. But we're going to talk about budgeting from God's perspective. You see, the tension that happens with a lot of life, this is true of everything, man. This can be true about money. This can be true about marriage. This can be true about how you see yourself, how you see your neighbor, how you do your work. Like everything that we go into is a matter of perspective. And whose perspective we're looking at the world through, that matters so much. I mean, you look at, like we said, this football thing that happened over the weekend, and you look at that through a perspective of just your team, and no team drafts bad according to their fans. Because that's a perspective that they see through. You think about marriage, and who are you going to listen to? And can you still listen to them? Or do you listen to Dr. Phil? Do you get to a counselor? Do you pick up some books? Do you look at the Bible? Like who do you listen to when it's about marriage? And if you listen to your mom, your spouse may never be good enough, right? She wasn't good enough for you then. She's not good enough for you now. He was never good enough. He's never good enough. I don't know why you keep talking about this. Who do you listen to? What's the perspective that things come through? You talk to some people about going outdoors, and they will tell you how amazing it is to be outside, to be walking through trails and trees and mountains and hills. And other people, the bugs and the mud and the humidity. And they're in the exact same space. And so it really gets down to the perspective in which we live our lives, and we have to wrestle through that. And when it comes to money, everybody has a perspective of money too. And so what we're trying to do over the last few weeks, if you've been with us, is to enter into a perspective about money that we can see what God is doing about money, how he views money. And since he's the one who made everything and sustains everything, how do we line ourselves up with what God thinks about money? If I could get the slides on the back, that would be awesome. Otherwise, we'll have some interesting fun today. So as we go into money talks, we're kind of going through this dynamic of what will your money say if your money could talk? And I've made kind of this statement each week. I happen to think if your money could talk, your money would say the same kinds of things that Jesus said when he actually spoke about money. Because money belongs to him to begin with. He creates, he sustains, everything is his. The book of Revelation has this beautiful description of Jesus. When you start going through the 7 letters of Revelation at the very beginning, each letter has a different description of Jesus. And in one of them, Jesus says, I am the one who has the keys to the storehouses of David. Now, for an Israelite to hear that, 2 people had the keys. The king had a key, and the treasurer had a key. And the treasurer could open up the vault and do whatever he wanted to with it, as he pleased, with the full authority of the king whenever he wanted to. So what Jesus is saying is that the Son has the equal access to the resources as the Father, as the Spirit. And they can open those storehouses anytime they want to, however they want to, for whatever or for whomever they want to. It all belongs to him. And so we start to listen into what he says and how he feels and how he talks about money, because it's significant. It's all his. When we think about the dynamics of money, I'm not getting a click here. Jim, you want to walk with me? You can click it for me. And maybe I'll say next slide, and if I forget and we start going long, just keep us moving, okay? You'll start seeing Jim flip the slides like this. Here's the truth about money. Last week, if you were here, we gave you a money tracker. And I said for 7 days, just keep track of your money, whether you use an app, whether you use the piece of paper we gave you, whatever it was, keep track of your money. Because here's the thing. Money is easy to track, but it's hard to catch. It will outrun you all the time. If you're not keeping up with it, it will outpace you, it will outrun you, it will outmaneuver you. It's like the gingerbread man. You know the story of the gingerbread man? Run, run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me, I'm the gingerbread man. And he runs all over the place and no one can catch the gingerbread man. That's money. If you're chasing it, you'll never catch it. It feels that way. I was sitting with a guy in our FPU class this week, and he's like, the hardest thing about the whole debt dynamic we're talking about is I feel like I'm never going to get ahead. You can give principles and practices and talk about discipline, but until a person enters into that, it almost feels insurmountable sometimes. The mountain of debt that some of us look at and are weighed under. The mountain of uncertainty with retirement and economies. And we look at it and go, what do we do? But Jesus says something interesting. He says, with the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And so we look at money with the ability to enter into this space, entering into this space of going, oh, did it just work? No? Oh, well. Sorry, online people, stick with me for a second. We may just have a dead battery, I don't know. If only Jimmy was here today. We'll see. If I toss this to you, Mark, can I go overhead? Maybe I just go front row so I don't hurt anybody. Just pass it back. So money's easy to track. Let's go next slide. Money's easy to track, hard to catch. So I want to give you an oversimplified budget. This is how most people view their money. When we talk about how we track money, what we're going to do with money, here's that tense word, budget. Budget is that word no one wants to talk about because now all of a sudden it feels like we have no way out. There's no wiggle room with budget. I don't know, like me, I'm not a good rule follower typically. Like people set boundaries for me and the first thing I want to do is go beyond the boundary. Don't swim past the line. Why are you way over there? Don't do this, don't try that, don't do this, don't do that. And I always find myself outside of the boundaries. I don't try to be a troublemaker. I think for his good purposes, God made me a troublemaker. I'm still negotiating that with Corey most days. Because Corey's a beautiful rule follower, man. If you set up rules, Corey's golden. If you need someone to follow the rules, but it also is tricky because like in Monopoly, there's like a rule book that comes with the game. And then there's another rule book, and it's like this. And she knows that rule book. So you don't play Monopoly with her because she starts manipulating the game because she stays within the boundaries of the rules. I don't even like Monopoly. Thank you. But mostly because she wins all the time. But so people get into this context of money and rules, and so budget seems like we don't want to do budgeting because it feels like a rule and we're constraining ourselves. So now, what do? So here's how most people build their budget. Right? First, they spend it. You get paid and you spend it. If you don't believe me, go to any store that you want to the weekend of the 1st and the 15th. I don't care what store you go to. Go to Target, go to Aldi, go to Walmart. Just go to a store on the 1st and the 15th. 1st and the 15th, all kinds of people are at the stores. It's Costco any day, right? Like, just stay away from Costco. So many lines. Spend it. But then people remember, dang it, we've got payments. So they repay it. You don't even get a chance to pay your taxes. They take that before your money even gets deposited. But because we don't think about it, it just kind of hides in the middle. After we're tired of spending and repaying, if we have anything left, we'll save it. And should we remember it or be moved enough, we'll give it. To a neighbor, a family member, an organization, a cause, we'll give it. And so when we start to think about how money actually works and how we budget it, this is what it looks like. The oversimplified budget. Me, America, me, and God and others. That's how most of us live when it comes to money. Me, 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 God, and others. And that's the way we look at money. But God says something to us about flipping the script on that to where he challenges this. We live this me first living with leftover giving. You ever get leftovers? Like in my house, we always used to try to cook one extra meal. Like there's enough of us to go around that you have to control the portions to have leftovers. But we would take one leftover meal from every meal and save it, and on one night we have leftover night. And you get to choose whatever we have for the week, you get to eat that. Now if you're smart, you get Wednesday's leftovers on Thursday because it's closest to then. You don't want Thursday's leftovers a week later. But sometimes you're that person and you get stuck with that meal. And then you get to hear the complaints. This one tastes like the refrigerator. You ever get food, like you put it in there and you think it's going to be fine, but instead of tasting like the barbecue you wanted to retaste, it tastes like your fridge, and then you don't even, why does it taste like what does a refrigerator even taste like? I don't know, but that tastes like a refrigerator. I hear that comment in my house all the time. Or it tastes like plastic. I don't have wooden boxes to store food in. No one suggests that, you know. So, of course it's going to taste like plastic because that's what it's been in. And it's kind of like the refrigerator, but put some salt on it. You'll be fine. You know, but this is how we treat our money, like me first living with leftover giving. And outside of Thanksgiving at 5 p.m. when everything's cold and kind of on the counter, nobody really wants leftovers anyway. Like, do y'all do that with Thanksgiving? You like kind of just leave it out like all day long, even though you're like full to like there, you keep walking by and nibbling on everything that you just got through being full on? But we live with leftover giving. Our generosity that we often engage isn't really generosity. Because true generosity comes with intentional forethought. To truly live a generous life is to think of others first. Right? To put others first. But we often live me first living with leftover giving. The oversimplified budget, according to Jesus, is God, others, me. Now remember, if we were to go through all 4 Gospels and watch Jesus, every time he talked about money, he never asked people for money. He constantly pushed for people's hearts. And the challenge of money starts to follow the position of our heart. And that's where it gets tough. Especially in a world where economics begins to say things like inflation. If you're like me, your grocery bill's gone up at least 40%. At least 40%. And we have a lot of mouths to feed at home. You know, you think about debt. You start thinking about retirement. I just turned 47, 50's on the horizon. Before you know it, if God allows, I'll be like 80. Like I think once you turn 50, you sneeze, you're 80. Like what happened? Where did it all go? You know, do you retire? Will you have enough to retire on? And if you thought you had enough 7 years ago, with the rate of inflation today, you don't have enough, and that causes you to worry, right? And so we start to wrestle with how do we really live into this? I mean, some of the stuff Jesus says, like it's only spiritual, right? It's not really practical. And yet the most practical life we could live, the abundant life, falls through Jesus. And so he continues to challenge our thoughts in this. So if money talked, this is where I think money would say. We said that money said in the first week, I can add meaning to your life, but I'm not the meaning of life. I add meaning to your life. I can help you do some things, but I'm not the end. But I want to help make your life a means, because when you are a means, you are meaningful. When you're an end, it just fades away. Last week we said that the moment you think you own me, I actually own you. That according to God, we're managers, not owners. And so we manage everything for a limited time. Our relationships, our time, our talent, our money, we manage it. We don't own it. So if money could talk to us today, I think money would say this: my direction reveals your affection. Now money's pretty cool in this sense. Like, money will go where you send it. Money will go where you send it. It is a much better servant than it is a master. Money doesn't want to own you, but we often give money control of our lives. Money will go where you send it, and where you send it reveals what you really love. And those aren't my words, those are Jesus' words. And we're going to get into those. Let's talk about treasure hunting in Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is, I think, if this is just me, I wasn't living in the ancient world. I didn't get to travel with Jesus. But we find this particular sermon being told in a couple of different geographic locations. In Matthew, we call it the Sermon on the Mount. In Luke, we call it the Sermon of the Sand or the Sermon of the Plains. And it seems like this is the kind of thing when Jesus went place to place, he would just teach this. This thing that we call the Sermon on the Mount. And what we see with the Sermon on the Mount, it begins in Matthew chapter 5. It goes through Matthew chapter 7. It probably summarizes everything that Jesus was saying when he said, repent and believe the good news. The kingdom has come. So how do you live into this kingdom? And we see this beautiful sermon unfold, and Jesus begins to talk about so many things. He talks about how we deal with the commandments in particular. You've heard it said a long time ago, but now I tell you. And he talks about anger. He talks about lust. He talks about greed. He talks about relationship. He talks about how we live into loving God and others. He talks about how to give, how to pray. And as we get into this dynamic, he's talking about how to fast, and then he gets into possessions. And what do we do with this? Ultimately walking us through this beautiful passage of how God cares for us and provides for us. So in Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 19, Jesus tells us, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light within you is darkness, how deep is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. He will hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. We get these tensions. Our money's direction reveals our affection. Where your heart is, your treasure will also be. So when Jesus talks about money, and we've said this a couple of weeks in a row now, right? When Jesus talks about money, his number one concern is your heart, not your wallet. Because if your heart is right, your life will follow. If I'm living right with God, my affection is set on him, my life will follow. The Pharisees of Jesus' day, they often get painted to being the bad guys in the Gospels. They're not really the bad guys. They're kind of the misunderstood guys, and they misunderstood Jesus, and that created the conflict. These guys loved God so much, and they knew the history of their people so well. They watched the fall and the breaking and the sinfulness of Israel, that as they came back together out of exile, they began to create rule on top of rule on top of rule on top of rule to protect the relationship with God. So God could be here Israel could be here, but they created this cushion of rules so that they wouldn't fall away from God. They were trying to protect the relationship with God by creating all of these rules and structures. And what happened in Israel is that it became about following the rules and not about loving God. So when Jesus shows up on the scene and he begins to talk about where the kingdom really is, that it's not about these layers of rules, but it's about the position of your heart. Does God own your heart? And in the ancient world, the heart wasn't just this beating organism. It was the center point of the entire person. We often will exchange mind or soul in the Western world for what the ancient Israelite would have understood as heart. The thing that drives the affection of your being is the thing where your treasure is found. Where your treasure is, your heart will also be. So that thing that drives your innermost being, is it God or is it something else? And that's the challenge that Jesus continues to push all the way through. And this totally happens when he talks about money. According to Jesus, your heart follows your money, not the other way around. We can find it. Where you're putting your money, we can identify where your heart is. It's just for Jesus. It's that close, that intimate of a connection. What are you investing in? Where does your heart fall? Where does the grab of your soul move? And then how does life follow? And Jesus is going, all we have to do is watch. Watch what we do financially. And we can know immediately what we love the most. Over the last several weeks in our culture, a major beer manufacturer made a pretty poor business decision, not knowing their constituency, because the world is supposed to be woke, right? And the world is supposed to be supportive and encouraging and inclusive. And they made this massive campaign centered around a transgender individual, and their billions of dollars have lost in stock on their decision making. And they just kind of watched where that went, and musicians and artists and actors posting things about this particular company and losing things, and people have lost their jobs, and it's been really, really tragic to kind of watch. Because the thing that you're supposed to know as a business owner is you're supposed to know your constituency. You have to. Because if you don't know your constituency, you got no business. And all of a sudden, the Anheuser-Busch Company has found themselves in quite a predicament. And they have been like the major story on like the news. Like you get Ukraine, you get presidential races, you get stuff happening with Trump, you get Biden and Harris in their speeches, and you get Anheuser-Busch. It's all over the place. And you start to kind of watch this dynamic. And what you're watching in the culture is an issue of hearts and money in this chase. As a believer, the same could be said for us when it comes to our hearts and our money following each other. Maybe the country isn't as woke as the executives at Anheuser-Busch had predicted. And hearts and money are following each other right now. But what does that look like for people who believe when it comes to where our heart and our money goes? And how does that track? That's the weight that Jesus is kind of bringing into it. Our heart, our money, they walk together. Whatever gets our money gets our attention. You ever watch people for the last 20 years, 25 years or so, like being in church ministry and kind of making events with teenagers, whatever, you see this happen a lot. Like I remember in youth ministry, Facebook was kind of a new thing. It feels weird to say. Like I've been on Facebook for 2 decades. Isn't that weird? Right? 17 years. So you've been out there for a long time, right? And you start to watch these things. And when we used to play on these events, there was a yes, no, maybe, and they still have those things. Most of the teenagers in my youth group would click maybe. Are you coming to the event? Yes, no, maybe. Maybe. We got like 300 maybes. You can't plan anything on 300 maybes. So we had to make a rule. I hate rules. We had to make a rule that if you check maybe, it means no. Because they were always waiting for something better to come along. We'll go to the youth event unless something better comes along. But you know what? Those teenagers become adults who do the same thing. And maybe they learned it from adults who did that. They wait for something better to come along rather than to commit. But here's what I know. Here's what I know. You will give your time, and you will give your money, and you will give your effort to what you value most. If you value Minnesota sports over everything, you will have those season tickets no matter what. And you will figure out how to get to those games no matter what. If you value hunting, fishing, camping, you will find a way to make that happen no matter what. If you value nice dining and going out to eat, you may not save money this month, but by golly, you're going to go have that steak down at Morton's. Because this is Morton's month. If you value traveling, you will see the world and leave everything else empty. Whatever gets your money has your attention. And there are things all across our lives that grab our attention. In and of themselves, are those things wrong? Is it wrong to go to a nice restaurant? No, it's not morally wrong. Is it wrong to travel? No, not morally wrong. Is it wrong to have season tickets? Not morally wrong. Enjoy. Where it gets wrong is if that thing's number one. And if that thing's number one above all else, then we have a problem. And Jesus says our money is a key indicator of looking at what's number one in our lives. Bank statements, not Bibles, reveal the true location of your heart's desire. You can look at it all the time. When I was early in ministry, one of my mentors told me, I can watch your bank statement and your calendar and know what you're most committed to. I never have to ask you about what you're reading in the Bible. I never have to ask how many times you've gone to church or whatever. Show me your bank statement. Show me your calendar. I can show you where your heart is. And the problem with it is Jesus said it first. If it was just that guy who said something about it, I think, okay, that maybe works for you. But then when Jesus talks about it, like, what do you do with that? You ever sit down and try to negotiate with Jesus when he's telling you stuff that's hard and you don't like? Well, Jesus, you know I love you. I just got to get to Africa this year. You understand, don't you, Jesus? I mean, you made Africa. It's pretty cool. I've never been, so I got to get there. I got a bucket list. And since I don't know the days nor the, like if you just told me I'm going to kick it like in 10 years, I'll go to Africa in 3 years. And I'll give you everything. But since you're not telling me that, I really got to go to Africa now. And we start to negotiate these kinds of things. The trouble that happens with it is like if money reveals our heart, it's not just money we negotiate with God with. Do you know how many people have come into my offices over the years and have told me it was God's will for them to have an affair with somebody? No joke. No joke. Real conversations. Pastor, God just wants me to be with this person. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Because you made a vow before God and others that you were with that other person. This is not God's will for your life. And we start to negotiate all kinds of things with God. And we can see the position if we just watch our money. It's easy to trust God with what we don't control. You ever think about like how you pray? Like we can't control our health stuff. Like if we get sick, we'll give God our health all day long. All day long, I will give God my health. I will give God my children. My children are out of control. None of them are here today. They're all adults making adult decisions. I had one daughter come up this week and say she wants to move out. I'm like, cool. Where do you want to move to? I don't know. I want to move out of state to finish college. Okay. Where are you going to go? I don't know. Somewhere south. Somewhere with sunshine. All right. Well, let's talk about responsibility for just a minute. I said, anytime you're ready for it, I will give you a half cup of adulting and just let you taste it. Like a Costco-sized sample of adulting. You can choose. Do you want your insurance? Do you want your cell phone? Do you want your grocery bill? Do you want some utilities? You let me know. I'll give you a taste of it before you move out. Well, I wasn't talking about that, Dad. Yeah, but someone's got to pay out-of-state tuition. Mom and I said we would pay for college. We didn't say where we would pay for college. We can cover in-state tuition. Oh. So someone's got to come up with that extra money. Who's going to do that? Well, we'll talk about this later, Dad. Okay. You think about it. Something breaks down. You have no mechanical abilities. God, just bless my car. You give God the car all day long. But money as a whole feels like we control it. We talked about this last week. The pronouns that we use with money are often my and mine. And it feels like we control it, so we don't want to give God control over it. We think we're in control. It's easy to trust God with what we don't control. You can give God your neighbor all day long, but can you give God your wallet? Sometimes no. Because it hits the control button in our own souls, right? According to Jesus, we have to reprioritize our affection. That's what the whole Sermon on the Mount is about. Where your money is, where your treasure is, your heart is also. So you have to reprioritize. You got to flip the script, right? If our budget is me, God, I got to flip the script and go God. Others, self. It almost sounds like the great commandment, doesn't it? Love God with everything you have. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And God is calling us to reprioritize our lives around what he calls the greatest way to live life. The abundant life is found in a God-first, others-focused way of life. Living beyond myself into other people's lives is what makes my life a means and not an end. When I live that great commandment kind of life out there, God, other, self, my life becomes meaningful. And not just so other people can tell stories about me, but because my life is actually lined up with this beautiful commandment that Jesus gives. It goes, this is where life is found. This is what it looks like. And so I reprioritize my life, all of my life around that commandment. To love God, love others as I love myself. And that's where it gets down to. So we start to talk about what that looks like in terms of flipping the script. And we start to do that. The thing that we get to, the challenge, like number one, is you got to decide how much to give. If God is a give-first God, and he is, before you ever earned it, God gave Jesus for you. And by earned it, I mean before sin ever came into the world. You earned a rescue out of rebellion. And Scripture says, before the foundations of the earth, Jesus is the Lamb who was slain. He was never plan B. I do not sit on cosmic thrones to know what God was thinking as God was thinking. I just know his ways are not my ways, and his ways are higher than my thoughts. But I believe his word to be true, and that very word says that before the foundations of the earth, Jesus is the Lamb who was slain. We earned a rescue because of our rebellion. And we live in that God was a give-first God who didn't need to give anything. So I reprioritize my life to look like his model, and I got to decide how much to give. Now, some people, if you're a good Baptist in the room, I don't know if you're a good Baptist in the room, you're like, you got to tithe. And if you say it like a Southern, you got to stretch it out. It's all about the tithe, right? And a tithe means 10%. But here's what happens. Most people I know who tell you you have to tithe don't know the Old Testament as well as they think they do, because they would really talk about your 37.5%. Now, Pastor, what are you even talking about? That was what Israel used to give in honor of God. 37.5% of everything they earned in a year went to God. Now, they were under a theocracy. That meant God was in control. He was in charge. No presidents, no Congress. Nowadays, 24.5% goes to taxes. That's what would happen with that 37%. So 24.5%. Now we're left with 13%. Tithe is just 10. 10's far cheaper than 13 if it's just about money. But if it's just about the amount, then your heart's not right anyway. If it's about the minimum, if it's about meeting a minimum, my heart's still not right. When Jesus shows up on the scene, I don't think he eradicates tithing, but he doesn't talk about tithing. He talks about giving. It's different. But you have to decide up front, how much am I going to give? Who are you going to give to? Is it your church? Is it missionaries? Is it organizations who line up with your life? We give some to Cornerstone, and then we give other things to foster care organizations that we support, and children in need. I mean, our lives kind of show that we have kids that now are ours that once were not. It's kind of something we feel that God called us to do. So we also support beyond us into organizations that help there. Because of my story with abortion, I support New Life Family Services. It's just kind of a thing we do. So I'm not saying give everything to church. The board may not like that, but who knows? Finance team for sure didn't like that, but that's okay, right? Finance team. But you got to decide, who do you give to first? You got to set that first. The second thing you got to figure out is to find the center of your resistance. When you think about that percentage, why are you resisting it? How much will I, because you're going to feel it, right? Ooh, I don't know if I can do that. Like you're going to come up with a number, and then you're going to look at your money, and then you're going to go, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Sit with that resistance for a minute. What's it about? What is that thing that makes you feel that tug that goes, I don't know if I can do this? Is it the amount of money that you have? Remember, it's not about the amount, but the impact. Is it about something else coming up? Like, what's the center of that resistance? Spend some time with that resistance. And as you think through that's going to be a place where you're going to watch God move in so many incredible ways. He's going to grow you and shape you and challenge you and move you. That resistance is going to become your friend. And then challenge number 3, give it anyway. Decide, face the resistance, and give through the resistance. Don't let the resistance win. Give anyway. I don't know where God's going to put in your heart what to give. On the flip the script sheet on the back side, there's 2 very easy pieces, right? At the very top, how much of your income will you give? Choose a percentage, 1%, 10%, so maybe more, I don't know. Choose a percent. Choose what you're going to save. The rest of it, live on. And then figure out where you're going to go with it. But if the script is God first, others second, me next, and it's not saying just you get the leftovers, you get the rest. God gives you the rest to live. The front of that flip the script kind of shows an order of some things in which you may want to do stuff. And some kind of biblical encouragement along the way. They're good tools for you to take with you to start to apply. You take those debt snowballs that we talked about, least from greatest. You start paying off that lowest debt. You start building momentum. All of a sudden, you're free. And that free now lets you just skip that 4th piece on the flip the script. You don't have to budget for debt anymore. Because you're starting to track your money. You know where it's going. You've reprioritized your life around kingdom living. You're going to feel better about life. You're going to see it. Your heart will shift its position. You're going to face resistances. And then with your money, you're going to learn how to do that with other pieces in your life. To be able to face the resistance in other areas and overcome that, because God is going to be showing you and growing you and moving in you all this way. To reprioritize your life, that money, where your treasure is, your heart will be. And when my treasure becomes God's way, when my treasure becomes God's way, my heart will follow it in every aspect of my life. And money becomes a vehicle for learning how to live abundantly in a world of consumption. And we will truly live blessed and full. But we got to flip the script. Give God first, others second. Live off the rest.